Hello and welcome. This is To The Point editorial discussion by Neva AS. In this video, we are going to discuss all the exam relevant articles from the Indian Express. Today we have two articles for discussion. The first article is on the Agnipath scheme, which is important for you from the perspective of prelims as well as the security part of the GS3 paper. It can also be considered as a scheme under the governance part because this scheme has been a major electoral issue as well. The second article is on the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, which is an important concept that has to be discussed in the context of climate change, which is a hot topic for the prelims as well as the mains in GS3 paper. Let's go to the first article, which is the Agnipath scheme. Now, what is the scheme? The provisions of the scheme have to be understood first. This scheme, what it does is it makes all recruitments, be clear that all recruitments below officer rank and except technical will be through this scheme, and it is to all the forces including soldiers, airmen and sailors. So army, navy and air force recruits them except technical below officer rank. Now the second major criteria with respect to the age, which is 17.5 to 23. This recruitment, as you know, is for a period of 4 years, which is the classical controversial part. After 4 years, 25% is retained for permanent commission, which is 15 years. During this 4-year tenure, every Agniveer, as they are called, will have a basic pay of 30,000 to 40,000. It will have an additional risk and hardship allowance. Why this becomes important is because there is a concept called Seva Nidhi with this. 30% of the salary is contributed to the Seva Nidhi by these professionals, and equivalent amount is added by the government. At the end of their tenure, they can withdraw the lump sum of 11 lakhs. Most important of all, after the 4-year tenure, there will be no pensions. It has some relation to the aim of this program. We'll discuss that. So these are the major characteristics of this particular scheme. This was introduced to bring more youth into the scheme. So the average age is coming down from 32 to 26 as a result of Agnipath scheme. Already there has been 2-3 batches running in different fields. Now the unsaid or undeclared aim of this is to reduce the burden of pension and salary of armed personnel. So you know that the old pension scheme has been a major electoral issue. There has been protest by armed forces, retired armed forces men on this. And there also the new pension scheme was introduced to reduce the burden on the exchequer. Here also, since we'll get enough numbers without pensions, it will reduce the burden on the government. The major criticism is that, see, when you study history, you can understand how sepoys were treated in Indian army. So with the same amount of work, the sepoys felt like second grade officers to the British soldiers. Critics accuse that a similar tendency will take place in the armed forces now, because the Agniveers are performing same amount of job what as lesser grade officers, because their salary is less, there is no certainty about their jobs, they don't have pensions, but they are expected to do the same amount. And it will also create unnecessary competition within the forces, where a lot of cohesion and compatibility is needed. Second, there will be a lack of career choice after this tenure of 4 years, because the prime age of the youth is going into this, and after that they'll have to start building a career from scratch. So these are the perspectives from the mains part, and this is the facts for the prelims. These are the takeaways from the article. Now let's discuss the next article, which is the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. It's a very important concept to understand. First, let's look at the history of this. Now the target, the whole idea of a target was set in the 2015 Paris Climate Conference. The target set there was not 1.5 degrees Celsius, it was 2 degrees Celsius by 2100. So the aim is to restrict the rise of temperature from a base year to 2 degrees Celsius, maximum 2 degrees Celsius by 2100. This was signed or there's a consensus on this by 195 countries. So when we talk about 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need a base year, right? And that base year is 1850 to 1900. This is not official, but this is the year that is taken for consideration all over the world. It is considered as pre-industrial level. Now don't go for the misconception that industrial revolution took place around this time, because industrial revolution in Britain was triggered since the 1700s. But this is the time period, latest time period, from which we have reliable and near global measurement of the climate. So that is why we are taking it as a base year. Now the target is 2 degree in Paris conference. And why are we talking about 1.5 degrees Celsius? Because the 1.5 degree target is based on fact-finding report. This fact-finding report says that if we breach the 1.5 degree target, there will be irreversible changes. We can use the technical term tipping point to mark that changes. Tipping point is defined as a critical threshold beyond which a natural ecosystem can tip into an entirely different state. Scientists have been identifying a lot of tipping points over the past, and we can take the European Space Agency's 3 broad categories to understand this. The first is cryosphere. Cryosphere deals with ice and low temperature, So any changes happening in the cryosphere, like the melting of ice in Greenland, or the melting of ice in the Himalayas, or in the Arctics, can be considered as this. So beyond a point, the melting will be so much that there will be glacial lake outbursts, or there will be rising sea temperature, which cannot be reversed. That is the tipping point in this context. The second context should be ocean atmosphere. Ocean atmosphere impacts everything. Because if you take the case of El Nino, it's just a change in the surface ocean temperature, and it will affect everything from Indian monsoon to droughts in Australia. So that is another field where tipping points can be detrimental. Third is biosphere. One example for that will be the loss of corals, which will affect the entire marine ecosystem and the biodiversity at large. These are just examples of tipping points. Beyond a threshold, the entire nature of this ecosystems will change. And that threshold is artificially set as 1.5 degrees Celsius. It doesn't mean that at 1.49 degrees Celsius there won't be any change, or at 1.5 degrees Celsius the world is going to end. But 1.5 degrees Celsius is a target that we have set. The more we restrict it within that, the better it is. The reason why it is again and again in news is because 2023 is the warmest year recorded ever. But this has partly to do with the El Nino as well. So in the coming years, the El Nino may turn into a La Nina and the temperature can come down. But scientists predict that in the next 4 years, 2024 to 28, this 1.5 degree target can be breached, because we have already reached the 1.45 degrees Celsius limit. So if you are to abide by the Paris rules of 2 degree by 2100, we have to be very focused on cutting our greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the takeaway. I hope the concepts and the perspectives are clear from the article. Thank you for listening.